I can't help but talk about Instagram and social media.
Oh yeah.
And the numbers get in your head. Like, you're popular because you got that number, right? Things change, suddenly losing people, and you're like, oh, like what did I do wrong? And people are always like, oh, don't worry about the numbers. But that's the whole premise of the entire thing.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another session of Influencer Insights, where we have Angelique Macleod. She is back, and she has more to share. We're really excited to hear about where she's been through roughly the last year, almost. Crazy that it's been that long already, but it's getting to be pretty close. So thank you, Angelique, for coming back. And where are you tonight?
Tonight I'm in Saskatoon, and I have the pleasure of being part of a film production with Versa Films. Cool. So that's what has brought me here into beautiful Saskatoon.
Yep.
And yeah, it's been good, and it feels like spring is finally in the air.
Getting to the point where it starts to come around, right? Like
it's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's gonna happen. Kind of a slow launch to get going here, but we're finally at spring, so
right?
Good.
Exactly.
So you probably can't share too much about the filming, obviously, because they're in mid-production, but the days were short in the last couple of days. Is that how that goes, or has it been?
They were long days. They were long days. I think it was 12 hours on set for day one of filming. But it's so interesting how it flies by.
Yes.
Time flies by when you're having fun. And just to be in a room with so many different creatives, yes. It's just mind-blowing, right? Just to be in a room of masters. I call them masters because I learned so much from them. And it's kind of cool how we bring so much of ourselves into these little moments that are captured on film.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see the end result. It will be good.
Not talking about the film itself, but enlightenments things you've learned, things that you're like going to take home from this experience that you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's made me realize how much I love acting. I absolutely love acting. I mean, I love modeling.
Yep.
But acting, it's so dynamic. And there's a scene where I'm screaming. There's actually a few, but
fun.
That I'm just screaming, and how liberating that feeling is, just to scream, right? And
let it all out.
I remember after I was done one of the scenes, I said to one of the cast members, I said, I felt like 11 in Stranger Things. Like it was amazing, right? But to be able to completely embrace a part of yourself that in regular life you can't.
Yes.
Right? You can't just scream in real life. You'll get locked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to cry and to just be so expressive. It's truly, a liberating experience. And so I'm looking forward to delving more into acting and taking some classes and
cool.
Being completely in the moment with it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting. Yeah, because it's one of those things where sometimes you get into an experience and you don't really know how far you want to go in that, right? But I mean, if you're only had a few days in and you're like, this is awesome, then that's
like
probably
a therapy
good sign, right?
session. It's really
If we could only just have a room somewhere and just go scream all once for a while, right?
Room. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And not be crazy, I guess. Yeah. So that's good.
Have you ever acted?
I have not done much acting. Made a couple of videos and stuff like that, but I wouldn't say it was formally acting. So that would be something I would definitely give a try at some point. So
there you go.
We'll see if
worth it. It's worth it.
See if there's a movie where I get to scream somewhere. I think everybody would. Maybe they wouldn't want to see that, but whatever. So.
That's awesome.
See where it goes. Cool. So have you been doing So the Versa film thing is kind of a recent project. Have you been doing any shooting through the last fall, summer, anything like that is interesting? Or
it's I've been really focused for the most part. I mean, I've done some commercial projects, some e-commerce projects as well, but for the most part, I've been trying to pull away and slow things down. And I mean, I know that sounds really bizarre, seeing that I was so involved in it
yes.
when we last spoke. But what I started to figure out was I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? This used to fuel me, and now I'm just tired. And I felt overwhelmed, even just to think about being part of projects. It was overwhelming to me. And so I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. Listen to your body, right? Listen to your body. What is it telling you? And for me, it was about stepping back a little bit, right?
Sure.
Why was I trying to do so much all the time? Was I doing it for me, or was I doing it for other people? And it started to become obligatory, where I was trying to do things because other people wanted it.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily.
Right.
So I've been trying to dial things back and really listen to myself. Am I aligned with this project? Do I really want to do it? Do I have the time to do it? Do I have the energy to do it? So yeah, I've been pulling back. The projects that I have done have really spoken to me, and they've been something that I've wanted to do. So I'm being more purposeful with my work versus expending energy for the sake of having more content, so to speak. Yeah.
To boast. Yeah, of course. Yeah. What kind of before we had spoken, you were kind of through the COVID stuff, you were still doing quite a bit. How much were you doing then versus what you're kind of been thinking of moving towards now?
Yeah, I mean, back when we spoke, I was doing about 6 shoots every second weekend.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
6 shoots every second weekend. I was working with a few different brands when it came to their promotions.
Sure.
I was on top of that working as a business development executive in a marketing company.
Right.
I published a book, so I was marketing that.
Right.
And I was trying to also be mom. And that's too much.
Yes.
I think I was trying to be Superwoman. And although, I feel like in moments I reached that, I achieved that. It wasn't sustaining.
Right.
I couldn't keep that going, and it was tiring. And so things started to slip. Right. I started to not be the best mom because I was exhausted. So I was speed reading to my kids. I was trying to, put everything into these little micro moments. And so I was missing out on being present. And that was a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you think that, like, I mean, obviously going back, you'd probably do it the same. Do you think that there's, for somebody that's maybe listening to this and going through their own struggle, like, is there some value in pushing hard and then maybe pulling back a touch once you've kind of maybe built some of the contacts and some of the content is created?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I really like that one, because when I look back at why I pushed so hard, I was pushing hard for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I was pushing hard not because I necessarily wanted to, but because I felt like there was an expiration date on my value.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And I felt like if I didn't prove my value by a certain time and I didn't hit that target by that certain time, I would miss it. I would miss the opportunity. Right. And I would lose that value.
Where do you think that seed in your mind, I guess? Did somebody say that, or did you just do that yourself? Or
I think I did it. think I did it to myself, but it's because of those childhood wounds, right? It's, you feel like you have to prove yourself to someone.
Yeah.
And that becomes ingrained in your mind as to, okay, well, I'm always proving something to someone. I always have to prove my value. I can't just simply be enough.
Yep.
And so when and I've talked about it in my book, we believe that we have to go to school, get the degree, get the job, find the one, get the house, have the kids, right?
Yeah.
And then make the money and retire, right?
Yeah.
And then we're set. We're set, right?
Yeah.
That's A to Z.
10 years of good living after that, right? So
exactly. but what I discovered was that, well, wait a minute. You follow that path and you still feel this emptiness, this complete void. And you feel like, well, that's not enough. And the money's not enough. And what I'm doing isn't enough. And why do I constantly feel like it's not enough? And so you start to tie that to, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Well, there's nothing really wrong with you. You're just following what you were taught is the right thing to do, versus following what is inside of you that wants to come out, right? You're not living your passion.
Right.
You are living for the end goal of being self-sustaining and being able to reach retirement with enough, with enough things, right? And enough stuff in your bank, right? And security and stability, what I've learned over the last few years is security and stability are a complete bullshit concept that we've constructed. It doesn't exist.
No.
Even if you're with a company that you think you're going to be with forever, you could be let go tomorrow. And they're going to replace you, or that job is going to become nothing, right? And what are you left with? And that is the question that I've constantly been asking myself throughout this whole thing is, when it's all said and done, did you live your purpose for you, or did you live for them?
Right.
And that's a really tough question to ask yourself.
Yes.
But it's a really worthwhile question to ask, because if it's in you still, with your last breath, you didn't really live.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good advice, because I think a lot of people are running from here to there and hoping that one day it's going to work out, distracted.
Professional distractors nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Looking back, kind of, when you started to look into maybe modeling, or you're thinking of your career, you try to be super mom, all those things, what was going through your mind, just so people can maybe identify themselves, like what's the same pattern? What was going through your mind at that point? Was it I got to get this acceptance, or was it, were you thinking that, or were you like, I just got to try and do more and just pushing?
When it came to my career, it was that scarcity mindset. It was, I grew up being told, if you don't get your degree, you're nothing, and you're going to be flipping burgers at Burger King for the rest of your life and living on welfare. And that's what I was taught. Like, seriously, that's what I was taught. And I had a workaholic mother who really ingrained that in me, as to, if you don't get a degree, you're a failure. And I didn't get a degree. I tried, and I was pregnant while going through my first semester of university, and I did the best that I could and figured out I can't learn in this dynamic, right?
Too much.
This is too much. And also, this isn't my learning style. Sitting down and reading a book and memorizing stuff, that is not how I learn. I need to be entrenched in it and immersed in it in order to fully be able to understand it and practice it. So I didn't get a degree, and I thought, like, what am I going to do? I'm a failure now.
Yeah.
I'm on welfare.
What are we going to do?
Right. And I was already, I had a little baby. I had, I wasn't even married at the time. So the Catholic guilt set in. Right. So it was just kind of like the story was against me.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I have to prove myself. I have to work really, really hard to show everyone that I belong here, that I deserve the paycheck that I get. And so I believed that I had to prove my worth every single day that I went onto the job. And so that's what I did. And I think I always took that with me. And I never felt like what I did was enough because I didn't have the degree. Right. Someone else had a degree and they were smarter than I was. And they were more worthy of every penny that they got, every promotion that they got, sitting in a chair. Like they got a title because of that piece of paper. I didn't deserve any of that. And so I worked my ass off and always had that imposter syndrome of I am a fraud. I don't belong here.
Right.
So that has followed me and continues to follow me. Like there's a lot of inner talk that goes on that I have to every day fight because it tells me you don't belong here.
Yeah. When
it comes to modeling, that was different because I was told when I was younger, when I was 13, I was told by a modeling agency who had sourced me through the Calgary Stampede. They said, you know what, you know exactly. You belong here. You are tall, you are thin, you're exactly what we want. Do our runway. I did the runway and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I had a Versace mohawk. I was wearing couture. I felt incredible. I walked that runway like a pro, or I thought I did, at least when I was 13.
Yeah.
It felt like I belong here, right? Yes. And then walking into that agency after getting what I thought was very professional photos done, they were not. And
looking back now,
I was a 13-year-old getting myself dressed for a model shoot. I had no idea what I was doing. It was awful. Like it was basement awful, like that kind of photo shoot. Bad.
I'm sure it wasn't that bad.
It was bad. But I took those photos, which I thought were very professional at the time, to this agency when they said, all right, like, let's meet you in person after this runway.
Yeah.
And the individual looked at my photos and, they were garbage. So it's whatever, but looked at me and said, your hips are 2 sizes too big and you're too girl next door. You're never going to be a model. Right.
Holy.
So to tell a 13-year-old, and my mom wasn't there, my dad wasn't there, I walked into that room alone. Oh. And so to hear that, it stuck with me. Yeah. It stuck with me. So eating disorder came from it. Never feeling like I was enough came from it. Right. Yeah. And then, I remember being pregnant and being told, well, now you're too fat. Now you're stretched out. Now you'll never be a model. Right. Like, right. Yeah. So then I felt disgusted.
Even worse.
Right. And then it wasn't until, in my 30s when I thought, I never really gave that dream a shot. And yeah, obviously I was told way back then I wasn't the right fit, but with diversity, equity, and inclusion and that whole movement and mature models and looking real, maybe I have a shot at this.
Yep.
And so I gave myself a birthday present of a real photo shoot. And they were like, this looks good. And you do well here. And I was like, I feel good. And I feel like this. And that became my passion project. That became the thing that I loved to do. And it wasn't necessarily it wasn't results driven. I didn't care if I made money doing it. I didn't care if I would get any opportunities from it.
Yeah.
It was simply my way of expressing myself and being in awe. Like there's something about paying a good photographer or being with, a good photographer and suddenly you just pop in a way that you couldn't when you go to Walmart and you, and you get your portrait studio, right?
Yeah.
Different,
Yeah.
different experience.
Say cheese, right?
Right? Right? Awkward Walmart
Yeah.
Christmas photos. Yeah, like it's that kind of thing. And so it became something where it was more so for me and just being able to like not prove myself, but express myself, right?
Yes.
And what I've learned from this entire thing, from the career side, where I feel it's an obligation, right?
Sure.
And it's that safety net, right? Which I just
Gotta have
talked
that.
about.
Gotta pay bills.
To that expression
Yeah.
and that passion, is that where there is passion, success will follow. It will always follow. But where you feel stress, that is a really good indicator that you are not doing what's right for you.
Yes.
And you're not expressing yourself in the way with the gifts that you've been given.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, some people say that stress is a good thing, and some people, they talk about it, and I've kind of come up with one analogy for myself is that there's a difference between stress and pressure.
Yes.
Because a lot of us need pressure to push and to move a little bit, right? Otherwise we just sit on the couch.
Yes.
But when you start stressing things, that's when stuff breaks, right? So
yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I get the whole diamond analogy. Yeah.
Exactly.
It is the pressure. It's not stress.
Nope. Make coal that way. Yeah.
Stress is a silent killer. It really is. Yeah. And I find that, throughout COVID, so many of us felt stress in different ways.
Yep.
And we reacted to stress all very differently, but what I saw in myself was wanting to distract from the stress.
Right.
And people distract in different ways, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's working more so that you feel like you're doing more, right?
Yes.
So the lull in time doesn't feel so bad, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing something,
busy.
Right? It's like, those people who are constantly in meetings.
Yeah. With themselves.
Right?
Yeah.
But then there was also, there was also that desire to numb, right? I want to watch TV. I want to sleep. I want to, do something else, right? Like,
was it any surprise that the liquor stores stayed open all the way through COVID when everything else shut down, right?
They did great, right? And cannabis and just everything, right?
Yes.
It was, how do you just numb this feeling of it's too much?
Yes.
And I feel scared, right? We all felt afraid. We felt afraid of losing our jobs.
Yep.
Our relationships were strained because we're constantly around each other and we can't get a break.
Yeah.
We didn't know what to do with ourselves. And it spiraled. And I think that even though the conversations about COVID are pretty much for the most part a thing of the past.
Yeah.
There's still, just like supply chain, just like a lot of things, we're still feeling the effects of it. And those effects are long lasting.
Yeah.
But it allowed for us at least the time to pause. And what I tell my kids all the time is that pause gives you a chance, instead of busying yourself and distracting yourself from feeling what you're feeling.
Yep.
It's really good to feel whatever that is, whether it's uncomfortable or if it's comfortable or whatever it is, just feel it, because your feelings are your inner compass. And they're telling you if things are right or wrong. Yes. And if it doesn't feel right,
there's a reason.
Question it. Don't say that you're wrong. Don't try to run from it. Look at what's going on and ask yourself, what in my life makes me feel this uncomfortable? And get clear on that, right? Because there's a reason for everything.
Yep. I've spent some time since we chatted last, even more with just sometimes just sitting with my emotions. Like if you're having a tough day, and instead of trying to, sometimes it's like you want to push through to get through it, but instead of that, just sitting with them. It's like, why am I feeling this way, right? And going through and taking yourself to a place to resolve that a little bit in your head so that you can move forward. Otherwise, it's like pushing it into the corner all the time and not actually dealing with it. So.
Well, and our emotions, if we create space for it, I always think about this like Mexico.
Cool.
So going to Mexico, it's all-inclusive resorts, right?
Sure. Yeah.
If you're around alcohol all the time during your all-inclusive vacation, you only want to be around alcohol for about 4 days.
Yeah.
And you only want to deal with about 4 days worth of hangovers before you're like, you know what? I'm going to choose something else.
Right.
That, right? It's always there. Same thing with emotions is when you finally just give them space and allow them to breathe and ask, yourself, what is this emotion trying to say?
Yeah.
I'm angry. Okay. Why am I angry? Well, because I'm constantly pushing down how I feel instead of communicating it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's spend some time with that. What am I not communicating? Right. And if you give yourself the ability to sit and create enough space for your emotion, whatever that uncomfortable emotion is, you can start to appreciate why it's there.
Yes.
And it doesn't control you and it doesn't boil over if you take the lid off of it and give it as much space as it needs. And
yes.
Right.
Good.
So I love analogies because they give that oh yeah or that aha moment.
Picture.
Yeah. But I feel like so many times we just want to put the lid on and contain it.
Yes.
And that's absolutely the opposite of what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. I think I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of that
because moment.
Yeah, like man, when people get stuck in their head, that is one of the worst places to be. And I think in the mental health conversation, there's some people that deeply struggle with mental illness and feel for anybody like that because that's super tough. But a lot of us, the mental health stuff, we're like right on the edge of it, and it's not hard to get yourself out of that if you can release and work through those emotions that are going on in your head, because those are the areas you get stuck and you just keep going deeper and deeper, right? So
yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that I've identified over the last little bit is that, like our stomachs, like I was thinking about this, I was doing a cleanse for my digestion because my digestion was sort of like, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And someone had said, well, you give your mind breaks through going to sleep or meditating or, going to a spa, relaxing, like whatever it is, you give your mind that time to, right?
Yes. Decompress.
You don't do it for your stomach. Your stomach's constantly going. And I thought, well, wait a minute. You're right. Like our stomachs are constantly having to process stuff because we're constantly eating and feeding it and whatnot.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. No, our minds keep going too, especially if we're distracting all the time. Watching TV takes up mental power. Reading a book, listening to a podcast, doing anything, scrolling on the internet, it takes mental energy. And so one of the biggest things that I don't think we practice enough is just sit in a chair and close your eyes. You don't have to sleep. Just close your eyes. Give your mind the ability to just not process anything.
Yeah.
And do it often, right? Because if you're constantly feeling stresses, you're getting worse and worse and worse throughout the day. And then you go to sleep. Sleep is the only time that your brain actually gets to kind of turn off. But if you haven't allowed it to rest throughout the day, it keeps going at night. Exactly. And in fact, it's trying to compartmentalize and figure out what you just experienced throughout the day. So it doesn't get to rest either.
Yep.
So, people are always saying, oh, meditation, meditation, meditation. And I understand meditation.
Sure.
It's not easy.
No.
Because we're trying to make meditation look a certain way. Or feel a certain way. It's a certain process, right? You gotta sit down, lie down, and let your mind, transform. Follow the cloud, right? I can't do that. Sure. I don't know about you. I can't do that, because the second that I think, okay, I'm listening to a guided meditation and my mind just wandered. Okay, but they said that I can let it wander and it's going to go back. I should just turn back the clock. Should I just turn it back again? Because I feel like I just wasted 15 minutes, right? Yeah. So I'm overthinking it and I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do. So it's counteractive.
Accomplish nothing. Yeah.
But meditation doesn't have to be that. It can be going for a walk and just walking. Yeah. Right? Sitting on a bench and looking out at a landscape. It can be coloring. It can be listening to music and just being with the music. Yeah. But it doesn't have, it shouldn't feel like work.
Exactly.
Right? Shouldn't
you're
feel
doing
like
it wrong.
You're exhausting yourself trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's not math.
Yeah.
So, but coming back down to a baseline and doing it often and allowing your mind just to rest. It's important, and we don't place enough importance on it, which is why we burn out as frequently as we do, why our emotions are as raw as they are, and why we get overwhelmed so much.
Yeah. You mentioned the burnout piece there. So have you seen, as we talked kind of through the beginning, that you were doing a lot of things going on, did you get to a point where you felt burnt out or got to burnt out, or what were the indicators of that?
Yeah, I mean, burnout, I've said it so many times to people. I've said I have felt burnt out since November of 2021.
That's a long time already.
That's a long time. That's a really long time. And I always say, I wrote a book. I should be above this, right? Oh, I'm talking about mental health. I should be above this. We're not ever above it, right? No, life doesn't come with a guidebook, or if it did, I lost mine.
Right. Me too. I don't know where that is.
Right? Otherwise, I check the index and I would figure out what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. But with burnout, I mean, when you constantly feel like you've got to do and be, and you can't turn off because now isn't the time, and there's a paycheck associated with it, or there's perceptions that are tied to it, you feel this obligation to keep going at your own expense.
Yes.
And it's taxing and it's debilitating. And when you're waking up and you feel exhausted, even though you slept.
Yes.
And when turning on the computer feels like work, responding to text messages feel like work. Like my grandma, she's like, God bless her, I love her.
Yeah.
But, my grandma would reach out to me and, hey, can we chat on the phone? And I would ignore it because it felt too hard to respond. I couldn't give, right? I just couldn't give.
Yeah.
And when my kids were like, Mom, can we go to the mall? And or my youngest daughter, Mom, do you want to go for a run? No, I have nothing. I can't. I don't want to bake with you. I don't want to cook dinner. I don't want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, reading an email, I'm good with words. I mean, I wrote a book, right? You've got to be good with words if you can do that.
Yep.
And all I wanted to do was write an email, just a very simple, non-cognitive, intense email. And even that felt hard to the point where it was taking hours to write one stupid little email. That is burnout. Yep. That is absolutely burnout. And taking a weekend or taking, a long weekend and saying, oh, I'm just going to sleep and it's going to be better. That's not how it works.
Nope.
Burnout, when you get to that point where your battery, like a cell phone, when you don't charge yourself,
yeah,
and you've let yourself get to the point where you're turning off just automatically, that is going to be months of giving back to you and resetting often, tying yourself and charging yourself constantly, right?
Yep.
To get your battery back up to where it needs to be, so it's at optimal levels.
Yep.
And that takes self-care. And we always put self-care off because we don't got the time for that, right? We got other things to do. But self-care doesn't need to be work. You're doing it wrong if it's work.
Yeah.
Self-care can be as simple as waking up in the morning, going, down to the couch, having some coffee or tea, putting a blanket on and listening to some music. And just instead of rushing out the door, creating 30 minutes before you need to rush out that door so that you can just feel comfort.
Yes.
That's an intention for the day. I create segments of intention. That's a big deal for me. So, right. So sitting down with a piece of paper, like I just have a nice notebook, and I just write down, today's going to work well. Today's going to be good. The conversations are going to flow really nicely for me. The right people are going to be in front of me, having conversations with me, right? Like it's not going to feel like work. It's going to be good.
That's right.
Because if I can just at least start the day with that, so it feels like it's going to be an easy day, chances are that the easy day will come. Whereas if I feel like I'm rushing out of the house, I'm anxious, I'm not breathing properly, I am tense, the interactions are going to follow that pattern, and I'm going to be worn out before 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you felt this way, but I went through a period of burnout a few years ago and kind of been through it now. So I'm on the mend, but always watching for it. I didn't understand what I was going through. I don't think as I was going on in my head, and maybe people listening are feeling the same. But somebody described it to me like you're falling and you can't catch yourself, and it's just it's honestly one of those terrible feelings because you just can't find ground anywhere, right? Once you're in that mode of just too many things going on, right? So,
well, what were the symptoms for you? Like, I'm so interested. Like, I know my symptoms, but what was it for you?
Well, I was doing a lot of different things, and some of it I wasn't completely aligned with, and I think that's a big piece of it. And I think I think it's kind of a warning, and kind of where you talked about before about the things that you were doing that were just like, why am I doing this? And I think when you're asking yourself that question, it's taking you down that path of just too many things going on and maybe just the wrong direction, right? And sometimes when you're so deep into it, like I said, it just felt like somebody pushed me off a cliff and I was falling, and I was just like, I don't know where the ground is, right? And it's an awful place to be because you feel completely out of control, right? But at the same time, every day somebody's asking for your attention, or there's an email or phone call or whatever it is, right? And it's really tough to dig out of that. But for me, it was a lot of just too many things going on, and people wanting my attention that I couldn't give to them, and relationships are strained, and things just weren't fitting together. You try and work on something that it would fall apart or take way longer than needed to, right? So
it's life stepping in with a course correction. That's the way to look at it. It's shaking you up and saying, hey,
what's going on?
Right? Like what's important to you? What's not important to you? How I'm going to ask you a question, Ben. I want to be the interviewer for a second.
Sure.
How do you deal with the guilt of saying no to people or to obligations?
Right. So that's a good one. And I definitely struggle with no. Ask my wife, she'll be like, Ben doesn't say no enough, but it's important. It's a skill to learn. I think that's one thing. Part of getting around the guilt is just remembering that whether it's for me, any time we're going through something, the results we're getting is kind of a reflection of ourselves, right? Yes. So, I mean, if you're pushing hard the world's going to push back against you and etc. Right? If you're not in
Yes.
flow. So when you're talking about burnout and getting through the guilt, to me, it's a lot about just remembering that if I want to be in flow, I need to pick the things in life that are in flow with me, and the people that are really needing me, they need me to be in flow and on point with the things that I'm supposed to be doing. So choosing to say no to the things that don't align with that is beneficial to everybody else in the long run. Because Ben's a lot happier, and the people that are supposed to get stuff from me are getting things from me, right? So
I wish that they would teach that in school.
100%.
I
Yeah.
wish that they would teach how to say no, because I feel like if there were two things that are missing in all school curriculums, it's
Just two.
who are you?
Yeah.
What do you like and what don't you like?
Yeah.
Right? Who
Yeah.
are you? Not who do I expect you to be, but who are you? Second thing is no. Learning the art of saying no.
Yeah.
Because when you don't, you violate yourself
Yes.
and your boundaries for the acceptance and the approval of others.
Exactly.
And that does not serve you. That actually hurts you. It's a form of self-harm, but it's something that we've been taught is something just to kind of put under the rug, right? Oh,
Yep.
no, just be a people pleaser. That's a good thing. It's not. It's actually very
Dangerous.
self-destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, those are good points. It's yeah. I think setting young people up in the world, I mean, you and I are both past the 30 mark, so we're looking back and reflecting a lot now. But I mean, you know, for kids that are, if you're in school and you're growing, like take this stuff to heart, because the mental game, that's where you win. You know, all of the other, you know, the degrees are good, education's great, all of that stuff's important. But if you can't win in your mind, you're beat no matter what you do, right? There are people with $500,000 worth of education that are on food stamps, right? Like it's just the way it is. Because
exactly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself.
Yes.
And
nobody else.
No. And 2 generations from now, this is something that I've started to understand. I had a friend of mine who I love dearly. She committed suicide actually at the beginning of March. She was a model.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and she had borderline personality disorder, just like I do. And she struggled a lot. But she was constantly trying to please other people.
Yeah.
And be enough for everyone.
Yeah.
And what I have told my children is that it's okay to be who you are. And some people are not going to be okay with who you are. Those are not your people.
Sucks to be them.
You don't need to convince anyone
No.
to be in your tribe.
That's
your
right.
tribe will be there for you, regardless of if, you know, of what you do. You can't get it wrong because they're your people.
That's right.
And feelings, the feelings that people have by you speaking your truth and being you, you might ruffle feathers, but guess what? Over time, people will get over that initial upset, whatever that is, right? Time heals emotion. So let people temporarily feel what they need to feel, and don't see it as you're wrong or bad for bringing that up in them, because you've triggered them.
Yes.
And that's something they have to work on.
Exactly.
You're not a bad person or wrong for triggering that in them.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think in the thinking about the modeling, acting world, like part of the thing is really getting attention. You know, there's no way around that. And if you fall in line too much with what everybody wants you to do all the time, you're exactly where they want you to be, and you're not going to get the attention. So it's when you step into yourself and the things that you want to achieve and the things that are going on in your mind where you want to go. It might not quite align with everybody else, but that's perfect, because that's where you start to get that attention too, right? So, and it's not about the attention piece, but it's about becoming into yourself, right?
Absolutely. And you brought something up there about, you know, being accepted And I can't help but talk about Instagram and social media.
Oh yeah.
And the numbers game. And it's a
Yes.
real thing, right?
Yep.
And the numbers get in your head,
Sure.
especially if you think that, oh, it's a popularity thing, which they like to make you feel, right? Like you're popular because you got that number, right? And
Yep.
that number is so important. And I've seen it, like the
Sure.
algorithms change. Suddenly
Yep.
you're losing people and you're like, oh, like what did I do wrong? And I'm
Yep.
wrong, right? Like, and it's, people are always like, oh, don't worry about the numbers. But that's the whole premise of the entire thing.
Exactly.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you deal with that number?
That's a good one. I worked really hard to grow my one Instagram. Then I've got 15,000 followers on there or something now, whatever it is. But I remember the 10K mark was always a big deal because when I started on Instagram, to get a link in your stories, you needed 10K. So it was a big goal for mine. So I worked really hard and I got 10,000 followers. And you know what the cool thing was? Nothing in my life changed. Nothing at all. Like I got the link, and I mean that was kind of cool, but realistically, it's like a couple of people that saw that were like, "Hey, that's cool, Ben. Good for you." And then it faded and it died, and nobody cares. And people see it now, and they're like, "Holy smoke! How do you have that following?" And it's like, "Well, I worked really hard at it." But it's not like it's a number on a screen, guys. Like it doesn't change your life at all. And it's not like you get to a certain number and you start making $1 million, because I know a lot of people with lots more followers than I do that probably more broke than I am too, right? It doesn't matter. But if you go out there and you start creating things that matter to you, you're going to build your own following.
That's
to
right.
heck with the rest of them, right? And that's the thing to focus on is the people that come back to you and say, "Hey, what you said, what you posted." Angelique's got great examples on her Instagram of things that I'm sure people constantly come out and just say, "Hey, that's really cool that you said that," or "I'm feeling that." And that stuff matters way more than the numbers on the screen ever do. So
yeah, absolutely. No, I think that at the end of the day, all of these social media platforms, we're going to outlive them.
Oh yeah.
Right? We're going to outlive them. And
oh yeah.
The amount of stress that we've and the amount of importance that we've placed on them.
Yeah.
I think it's very
short-sighted.
It's also telling, right? It's very telling about how important it is to really understand who we each individually are,
yeah.
and what is important to us.
Yeah.
Because these platforms, they give us the ability to talk about what we're passionate about,
yes.
and to convey that and express that.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the healthiest way of expressing it, right?
No.
So don't ever let your passion be fueled by the numbers that are associated with it. Just be passionate and express
100%.
yourself, and let your tribe gravitate toward you.
That's right.
Yeah.
If people will find you, it's amazing, right? When you're speaking what's in your heart, right? So
Absolutely.
So I have one kind of last question before we start to wrap up. You shared a lot of things, starting from being young Angelique and moving through life into where you are now. How do you think 13-year-old Angelique standing in the casting room would look back on you now?
I think she would be in awe. I think she would be in awe. She would say, wow, like all of the dreams that I had for myself, I got. I got, right? I can check that list off one by one. You did everything that I dreamt for you. And that's a really cool feeling. You're kind of gonna make me cry here, but
sorry.
But no, that's a success, Ben. That's a success. I couldn't even do that on set. But it's it's powerful, and I love that question because how many times do we really look back and ask ourselves that question of if your younger self could look at what you've accomplished today, how would they feel?
Yes.
And I think for most of us, they would be really fucking proud.
Agreed.
And I'm proud of myself from that lens.
Yes.
And you've reminded me right now just to be a little bit nicer and kinder to myself because of what I have actually done. And yeah, I think we need to start to look at ourselves through our younger selves' eyes far more.
100%. No, I think that would solve a lot of our anxieties and pressures and stuff in the world when we know.
How about you?
Okay.
How would your younger self feel?
I think proud's probably pretty good. I was reflecting on that recently too, and thinking about young Ben, and even where I'm at this week, working on a project in Edmonton. I remember thinking to myself a few years ago, how did I get here? You know, and me a few years ago, this wasn't on the radar for things that I would be doing or have the opportunity to. So if you got those goals, I mean, just chase them. If you can see it in your head, I think that something that's there, and regardless of how you get there isn't important, but just start with one step and keep looking to the thing that's going on in your mind, because it's real. So
it is. I love it. Thank you so much.
You bet. Well, for anybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Angelique and I had an awesome conversation here, talking about kind of mental health and your goal setting and your lifelong plans as you develop as a model or an influencer, anything in the entertainment industry. And we're happy to cheer you on in that. Go and give Angelique a follow on Instagram, because she does have some awesome posts and things that I think people really are going to get a lot of value out if you go out and check it out. So do that. And we look forward to hearing about Angelique's film debut as it comes out here in the next short while. And we're looking forward to seeing where you go after that. So thank you for being on.
Thank you. Take care.